The Browns, they're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The season, the 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great. Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year.
Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. I kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
You know, sometimes we start the show late by accident, and then other times we start the show late by design. Today's one of those days. I know you guys won't believe that, but there was a method to the madness today. But we welcome you in Off the Bench. Happy Thursday. Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. Casey back off on more Chatterbox responsibilities, taking care of business today. But guys, good morning. Happy Thursday.
How you doing? I'm doing great. Listen,
Oh, no.
Now we're good.
Now we're good? Now we're good?
Guys, good morning. How are we?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It was a pleasant hump day yesterday. Now we're here on a Thursday. So I'm ready to roll, baby. It feels good outside. Whenever it feels good outside, I'm going to be happy. So that's where we are.
It's a good day.
Jacob,
Yeah.
You're juggling today, so there's that.
That's the plan. Yeah, I don't know why the mic's turned off when I transitioned out of the intro, but that happened, so we're good now. Yeah, no worries. Kenner, you were good the whole time, so no worries there. It's just Elliot and I, so, the chat would be real upset if that was the standing for the entire show, so glad we got that fixed.
That would be very funny.
If only Kenner's mic worked and nobody else's, oh yeah, numbers would just drop left and right. Hey, friend of the show, Charlie Goldsmith. He's been busy, but he's making time for us, so that's pretty cool. We're just going to start calling him, our Chatterbox correspondent at this point. He was on an episode of Chatterbox Reds recently with Nick Kirby. He's obviously been on with us in recent weeks, talking all things Bengals, or Reds, I should say. But he's going to give us a little Reds and Bengals insight. He is back from spring training this week, and then, of course, he was at the Combine yesterday and had a lot of good stuff. Charlie's chalkboard, all the write-ups regarding spring training and the takeaways from yesterday's NFL Combine. Obviously, the availability with Duke Tobin. We spent a lot of time on the Bengals when it comes to the stuff that came out of Duke Tobin's mouth yesterday. Some stuff on that today. There's a lot of position groups that the Bengals are really going to be targeting with the draft coming up, so we'll highlight some of those key positions coming up around the corner. But excited to chat with Charlie Goldsmith coming up here shortly on the show. We will talk about the Reds, because the Reds, if you get rings for spring training championships, I think the Reds would be the odds-on favorites to come away. I mean, my gosh, everyone is just they're playing their hearts out at this point. If they could just carry this into April and May and June and July, I think we'll all be very happy Reds fans this summer.
I think that if the Reds win our Cactus League, is that what we're in?
It is the Cactus League.
So if the Reds win the Cactus League, I will put a large future on them to win the World Series.
Okay.
Ooh.
My reasoning is, if they're going to be really good in the spring, they have to be really good during the regular season.
Yeah.
That's where my mind is at right now. And I want the Reds to be as good as possible, whether that's in spring training, whether that's in the postseason, the regular season. I just want them to be good the whole time. That's what we're going to do. They won, 9-4 yesterday? So, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to run through a wall for this team.
Yeah. Wins and losses in spring training don't matter at all unless they're wins.
Unless they're wins.
Right. And since the Reds are winning and the Stars are mashing, then it means a lot. And the Reds are going to win 90 games in the Central and the World Series.
That's right.
So we'll talk about those great performances from yesterday. Matt McClain getting in the mix. Another big day from Elly De La Cruz, and some up-and-coming stars as well throughout the Reds farm system that had some big days yesterday. So we'll get to that coming up here around the corner. Let's see. We're going to take a look at the AFC North and take a look at each team's situation before we get to the draft and free agency. Already, big picture, it's what or bust for these teams in the AFC North as we sit here right now. Yes, your Cincinnati Bengals, Baltimore Ravens, Cleveland Browns, Pittsburgh Steelers. Big off seasons coming up for all four of these teams. We'll get to that coming up here shortly. But before we do all that, again, Charlie Goldsmith, we'll hang out with him around the corner as well. Let's send it to Elliot for Elliot's headlines.
Has you covered.
That's right.
Off the Bench brings you Elliot's headlines.
There you go. That was good.
I don't know why it started so low.
Well, that's okay. I think it's probably better to start that low. It's just so loud and obnoxious.
Do you know what that was on when I turned it up?
What?
9%.
9%?
Yeah.
Oh
I don't
my-
know what Casey built here, but this headline sounder at 100% would cause our listeners to go down.
Oh my God, 9%.
Yeah.
Headlines from yesterday. A lot of good college basketball games, so we'll start with that. Ohio State, road win over USC 87-82 last night. Dayton, your Flyers, they got a big win against Rhode Island yesterday. 25th ranked BYU, they fend off Arizona State on the road. 91-81, a 10-point win there. You have 7th ranked the Johnnies. St. John's survived against Butler 76-60. That was a great game last night. 17th ranked Kentucky. They won by 1 point on the road against Oklahoma. Oweh, 28 points, 6 boards for the Wildcats. Coach Cal, how about Coach Cal? He got a big win in overtime against Texas last night, 86-81. You have Indiana, back-to-back wins for the first time in forever. They win over Penn State 83-78. First-ranked Auburn, 30-point win last night against Ole Miss. By the way, Auburn is a wagon.
Yeah.
Jacob and I debate this, I think, once a week. If I gave you the odds, Duke or Auburn to win the championship or the field, who are you taking?
It's about to pick 'em right now.
It's just insane. I think, and I'm starting to lean more towards Auburn and Duke. I know you would want to take the field, but my God, those two teams are just really, really good. Especially
Duke just
Auburn's
jumped
unbelievable.
Auburn. Duke just jumped Auburn in the net. Duke's
Really?
number 1 in net now, and Auburn's number 2.
How about that, man? That's fantastic. 12th ranked Texas A&M. That was a shocking loss last night. They lost at home to Vanderbilt. Unranked Vanderbilt came into Texas A&M and won the game. Clemson, 13th ranked Clemson, they got a win over Notre Dame, 83-68. And 8th ranked Michigan State. I don't know if you saw this last night, Justin Kinner. 8th ranked Michigan State threw one up from beyond half court at the buzzer, at the horn, to beat Maryland. Absolutely incredible. 58-55, the final score there. I was at trivia last night, and the entire bar went crazy. So it was very cool. March is here. March is officially here. NBA. The Pistons, they stopped the Celtics 117-97. They have won 8 in a row, the Detroit Pistons. 8 in a row. Again, over the Celtics, the odds-on favorite to win the championship. The Pacers, they get a 20-point win over the Raptors, 111-91. The Rockets, they get a win, 118-106 over the tanking Spurs. And you have Paul George. How about this news? Paul George has put a hold to his podcast because he's going to focus on basketball moving forward.
Good for him.
That's great. We learned that lesson in February, actually in March pretty much. So good for Paul George. Other NBA news, NBA Centel banned. Banned from Twitter. Every team, I think, last night had some sort of silly little gimmick or tribute to our good friend NBA Centel. But yeah, man.
Elon and the boys gave him a month to add the parody tag to his account, and Centel refused, so he's gone.
So that's why?
Yeah, if he would have added the parody tag, he would be allowed back, but since he refused after multiple warnings, the account is gone for good. At least that's the current report.
That's insane. Other news around the world of sports. I guess this is kind of one, not really a big one, but I guess it is a bit. I'm not going to even say. Gene Hackman, the star of Hoosiers, unfortunately passed away, I believe, either last night or this morning at age 95. At age 95, obviously, one of the best sports movies ever. So that is pretty disappointing there. But outside of that, those are your headlines.
Some combine headlines as well. We talked about the Bengals meeting with a lot of the top edge rushers yesterday. Same thing coming across today. Met with the top safety, Malachi Starks. The thought would be that he would only be available at 17. It would be absolutely crazy for him to somehow fall all the way down to 49. So the Bengals may be attacking the secondary in the first round. But someone that the Bengals had been expected to attack in the draft for the entirety of this offseason, at least since they hired Al Golden, Xavier Watts, Notre Dame star safety, has not met with the Bengals yet. Same with Texas safety Andrew Makuba. Both had been linked to the Bengals in mock drafts and and team fits and everything along those lines so far through draft season. So a little bit of a surprise to see the Bengals not use their some of their visits on the safety group, but I think this just further affirms that they're going to run it back with Geno Stone and Jordan Battle, at least as the two starting safeties to start next year.
And there you go. Those are your headlines. Now, I do have to ask, you said earlier about, Gene Hackman passing away and bringing up the movie Hoosiers. You said it was one of the best movies of all time. You're a Hoosiers guy?
Not best movies of all time. A very good sports movie. Very good sports movie. Yeah, I've seen Hoosiers a few times, and I love it. It's pretty much, I'm not going to lie. You give me a sports movie, I'm most likely going to like it.
Yeah.
That's just what it is. But Hoosiers, obviously, one of the all-time greats. Not a lot of college basketball movies out there, so we'll take them where we can get them.
When it comes to Hoosiers, I have to do this.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It's too cheesy for me. I watched it the first time. I'm like, all right, just rewatch it with a more clear frame of mind. Maybe let's try to take it. I couldn't get into it. I thought it was just too cheesy. Like, what coach? Okay, what coach? When the player fouls out, he has to. The player goes to run into the game and he stops him and he tells him to sit. That's my team. And they keep 4 out there. What coach does that? That's not inspirational. That's stupidity. I don't know why. With the movie, I couldn't get into it. That wasn't motivational or inspirational whatsoever. Watch a Division I coach do that today. They're fired on the spot. Can you imagine watching Cincinnati Bearcat basketball the other night in a close game against Baylor? You have a player foul out in crunch time, game on the line. Player goes to run in to help save the day, and Wes Miller says, "No, that's my basketball team. Are you going to stand up and clap and cheer? No, you're gonna be like, what are you doing?" It was a horrible decision. I didn't like the movie. I couldn't get into it ever.
Hoosiers a 91% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes and an 89% audience score.
Everyone loves it.
The entire world likes that movie, Justin.
But I feel like it's a movie that you tell people that like everyone just I think they just brainwash you into thinking it's good. You actually watch it and you're entertained.
There's some movies that are built on nostalgia a little bit, and I watch Hoosiers because I feel that, and I like watching it. I'm gonna get you to have fun one time, Justin. We're just gonna get you. That's what we're gonna do. You're the only person in the world that's not like this movie, so we're gonna get you into a room. I'm gonna lock you in it. I'm gonna play it until you like it.
Well, we do a Chatterbox Hoosiers watch along.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then you tell me where the good parts of the movie are, and I'll maybe try to sway it your way. I'd pick Coach Carter. Coach Carter, I love that movie way more than Hoosiers. I mean, it wasn't even close.
I'll agree with that, but I won't put down Hoosiers. They're
still
both good movies, but I do like Coach Carter more.
That's still high school. That's high school basketball. It's a little different dynamic. How many college basketball movies are there? One? I think that's Hoosiers. I think that's it.
I mean, you have one coach that's trying to play 5-on-4, and the other coach is trying to, be a great leader to help these young men develop into successful men by taking high school seriously. And, give me Coach Carter any day. Give me, semi-pro. Oh, I love me some good semi-pro. I love Will Ferrell. All right, guys, give me semi-pro over Hoosiers.
Yeah, we got to go to break.
I mean, what is that? Come on. I like semi-pro too, but we can't We can't be out here slandering everything. Come on.
I'm praising Coach Carter. I'm praising semi-pro.
No,
I'm praising these basketball movies.
I think you're slandering just about everybody.
Luka and LeBron were doing the semi-pro against Dallas.
Were they?
Luka was in the post. He just kept throwing it back to LeBron. They kept throwing it back. They were both wide open.
Yeah, how about that? How about that?
Not impressed. 5-on-4 though. That's where the NBA needs to start heading. That's where you'll. But all right, off the bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinder, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, 1410 ESPN Radio in Dayton. Big day for the Reds in spring training. I know, who cares? It's just spring training. But again, every time I see a highlight of spring training, it's not just some up-and-coming star through the Reds farm system. It's these stars. It's Elly De La Cruz. It's Matt McClain. It's the newcomers. It's all the pieces we need for the Reds to be successful in 2025. Plus, ESPN put out their way too early MLB All-Star predictions, and there's quite a few Reds that pop up on this list. We'll get to that as well. More off the bench when we return. Rudy is another one. Not a fan of that one. Can't do that either.
I understand the Rudy one. I actually, there's a lot of good football movies out there. I'm okay with not liking Rudy. I still like it, but I think they've debunked that literally every aspect of that movie is not true.
And he was offsides.
And he was offsides. So I think that one's, I'll give you a pass for that one.
Fair enough. Spring training, obviously if you're good in spring training, it automatically means you're going to win a World Series. I mean, that's what some people are making fun of Reds fans for being excited about what we've seen early on. I have no problem. Like, Elliot, when you were trying to temper expectations just based off spring training performances, I'm with you 100%. I think it's a little dangerous. It's too dangerous of a game to play where we are going to get all of our hopes up based on spring training performances. But we've spent an entire offseason trying to not get excited despite even going to get a Terry Francona and just still being kind of depressed and just mopey about this Reds team. We got to see it to believe it. But I'm a lot closer to seeing it to believe it when we're seeing the stars that need to be good be actually good right now. We're not having to wait until it warms up for the ball to start carrying some distance to get out of Great American Ballpark. Like, we're watching guys already have that power right off the bat. We're seeing much improved at-bats from Elly De La Cruz. I believe he's yet to strike out this far in all his at-bats. He's already hit 3 home runs. I mean, my gosh, the guy's been on fire. Christian Encarnacion Strand, fantastic yesterday. Hit his first long win out of the ballpark. And Matt McClain, a couple extra base hits, a home run. It's not all coming together like that's it. This team's great. But for this team to be great, these are the guys that have to play well. And so far, these guys are all having great springs. Again, it's a little bit of a repeated thing that we've talked about after previous games already. But we haven't had a spring training game yet where one of these stars has not had a big performance. And I think that is key because consistency and confidence, I think, is huge when it comes to the big picture success of this team.
Other than just staying healthy, that's what I want to see is these guys hitting the ball well. I mean, that was the main worry going into spring training is that what happened with Noelvi Marte after his suspension could potentially happen to Matt McClain or CES after their injuries. They're not the same player that we saw before that we had so much faith in, and a little bit less so with CES. But if that's the case with Matt McClain, we're in a really bad spot now without Jonathan India on the roster. So to see them really both start off and playing at a really high level, really picking up where they left off, especially in McClain's sake, I think that is about as good of a thing as you can see from guys coming back from injury that haven't had full speed at bats in a while. To see them, picking up right where they left off, that's about as encouraging as you can see in spring training.
I think when I watch spring training, or at least I watch the highlights of spring training, I put it into a different lens, or I look at it with a different lens than I would anything else, right? Because I want to see what I want to see, and when I see it, I'm like, all right, that's going to help me out. And if one of my players has a bad game, has a bad at bat, has a bad error, I'm going to sit here and say that they can only improve. It's spring training; they're just getting warmed up. So it's a win-win for me when I watch spring training. I'm not going to really kill anybody or do anything like that because it's practice essentially. We're practicing right now. Obviously, there's a couple guys out there, and I want to ask Charlie about it when we get to him. Who's fighting for their lives right now? Who's out there trying to earn the spot on the roster? And their stats will matter. When we look at on the opening day roster, who's going to make that team, there's going to be a couple guys that will be on the team because of spring training, because of how they're playing right now. Obviously, a lot of the roster is going to be already filled, but there's a couple spots still available out there. And Noelvi Marte is a name I'd like to hear more about, but yeah, I think as of right now, we're tempering expectations. I'm happy the Reds are playing well this spring so far, but it's spring training. I think Nick Kirby tweeted out yesterday. Don't be the guy on Twitter or social media who says don't be excited. It's just spring training. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that I don't expect the spring training results to carry over to the regular season. That's all I'm saying. And you'd be kind of silly to think Elly's going to hit 670 right in the regular season. Maybe he does. Maybe he's that good. I just want to temper my excitement levels. I'm not going to get too excited, but I'm also not going to tell somebody else that they can't be excited because this is baseball. It's finally here. We wait all winter for it. You get to spring training. You start to hear the birds chirp. It feels better outside. And you want to see your favorite team play well, whether or not it's for a practice game, whether or not it's the regular season. You just want to see your guys go out and do well, and that's what the Reds are doing right now.
Yeah, and with Elly hitting like 660, whatever. he's hitting right now. I don't think it's about, for me, I'm not looking at that and saying, oh my God, that's who he's going to be. It's a small sample size of games early on. But usually in spring, sometimes you have a couple bad games, you start to improve and get better as it goes on. But it's like, I think it's impressive just to see the fact that these guys have come out swinging, no pun intended. And it's like they've just been itching to get out on the field, and they've just been itching to get that bat in their hand, and that's what has been a great sight to see thus far. Especially, look, it's one thing with Elly and McLean, but to see Christian Encarnacion Strand, finding a little bit of a rhythm early in spring too. I think that's a sign of good things to come for him. Hopefully he keeps that rhythm and confidence and consistency going throughout. But if we're gonna, and for me especially, if I'm gonna overreact to some of the positives, I'm going to naturally overreact to some of the negatives, and we haven't seen a ton of that. But I think, look, we talked last week about the most important Reds on this roster outside of the star players or the names that we're so used to saying. But Nick Lodolo is one that I've circled and said for this Reds team to get to where they want to go, he has to be that bona fide number 2 in this rotation at this point. And Nick Lodolo just, again, battling injuries last year. He always looks great in April, looks good in early May. And then as the season goes on, obviously durability, his availability, all that stuff becomes an issue. Didn't look great yesterday, and not going to overreact to it too much. But again, when everyone else is coming out and putting out their best stuff and the pitching's different than hitting, I completely get that. How concerned are we about Nick Lodolo's just outing? Because a lot of the same issues we've seen with him in the past already, what we've seen in just a brief outing already in spring.
Yeah, I mean, he walked, 3 guys yesterday. Again, this is where we talk about spring training, right? And I'm not gonna bash Nick Lodolo for 2 innings of work on February 27th. I just can't do it yet. Maybe as we get closer down the line, I'll be able to have more criticism. But pitchers specifically right now, it's difficult to judge them starting pitching based on these 1 inning, 2 inning, 1 2/3 innings performances. I'm not going to get on Nick Lodolo. It's spring training. It's all about warming up the arm, loosening up the arm, getting that arm ready for spring training. I would even say it's not even about results at all. I could be wrong on that, and if somebody wants to correct me, they can. But it's really just, we're going to get ready as best we can for the regular season. If I give up a run, I give up a run. I mean, that's not a massive deal. But to Justin's point, Nick Lodolo is a guy this year that, we have concerns about regarding his health, his consistency. When he's healthy and he's out there, he's one of the best pitchers in baseball. The issue is, will he be that this year? Yesterday, did he look great? No, but again, this is February 27th baseball in a game that essentially meant nothing. I'm going to temper my frustration and critique on him until we move down the line here. Obviously, if he has 5, 6, 7 starts, I would doubt 7, but somewhere around there in spring training, and he's still having issues, then we can start having that conversation. But as of right now, that start yesterday might as well have been a warm-up game. That's just him batting practice.
I have too much Nick Lodolo worry taking up brain space anyway to worry about him when he's healthy. I'm going to worry about him down the line when the injuries start to pop up. If he's healthy, if he's pitching, he's going to work through it. I have faith in him. He's never been healthy and looked bad at the major league level. He's always been a good pitcher until a blister pops up or there's a calf injury or anything along those lines, which we've seen a lot more than we want to see. But that's been the stuff that knocks him down a peg, not a healthy Nick Lodolo. So I still have the utmost faith in him to be the number 2 in this rotation and really drive this team right behind Hunter Green in a pretty dang good rotation. And nothing about yesterday changed that for me.
More Red spring training action coming up later on this afternoon. For our Dayton listeners, you can catch it right here on 1410 ESPN Radio, of course. But nonetheless, Reds will be back at it again coming up. So ESPN put out, and David Schoenfield put out their way too early 2025 MLB All-Stars, predicting what the starters and roster could look like for both American League and National League. And I only bring this up because quite a few Reds end up making this list, which is not surprising by any means. We know what the expectations and what the ceiling could potentially be for this team. But it's one thing for us as homers to think that. But when you start to get some of that national attention, who doesn't always pay attention to the Reds, start to take notice of some of these Red stars, I think that's pretty cool. So for the National League at catcher, predicting that William Contreras for the Brewers will be the starting catcher with Will Smith from the Dodgers being the backup. First base, Bryce Harper for the Phillies, of course, with the backup being Matt Olson from the Braves. At second base, it's Ketel Marte from the Diamondbacks, but Matt McClain, they're predicting, obviously, to be right there as far as one of the top vote getters for second base, competing with him for that spot. So no surprise there, guys. Matt McClain, the first one to pop up on this list. I think he was starting to get a lot of votes a couple years ago when he was healthy, not to actually compete for the starting job, but he was starting to get a lot of all-star votes and attention even in the build-up his rookie season.
Yeah, that just kind of helps confirm what we all hope and think about Matt McClain here in Cincinnati. It's always nice to see some, national pundits putting players where you think they belong, at least in your city with a team like the Reds, and a player especially like Matt McClain that we haven't seen do it very consistently yet. The fact that other people outside of this city have faith in him to be an all-star caliber second baseman right away this year, that means a lot, and it really helps with the faith that I have in the Reds moving forward. I mean, the more and more we see people say how great the offseason was, and these young guys are going to be all-stars competing for starting spots, I think that just continues to, validate the feeling that we have about this young core and what this team's going to be able to do this year and in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Matt McClain and Elly De La Cruz, both of them, I'm going to package both of them. They're the most important pieces on this roster, and if they're going to be good, the Reds are going to be really, really good. The national media should respect Matt McClain. Based on, the one season he's had up with the Reds, he's been phenomenal. He should have gotten all-star votes. And if he didn't get hurt, I'd argue he could have been on the all-star team. I think he was that good, despite the lack of playing time compared to the other guys on the all-star team. Matt McClain is that good of a player. And if he's able to play like it this year, again, this is just a team that has so many question marks. But if they're able to make some of those question marks periods, you're going to have a team that's going to fight for the playoffs. Matt McClain is phenomenal. And if you rank him amongst other second basemen in the league, he's got to be a top 10 second baseman.
Moving on the list to third base, of course, Austin Riley with the Braves predicted to be the all-star third baseman there with the backup, competing for some of those spots like Matt Chapman with the Giants and others. But at shortstop is where it got interesting because I was like, man, we love Elly, but he's not going to, overtake the likes of Mookie Betts and others. The Dodgers coming out saying Mookie's that's going to be his primary position this upcoming season, of course. But the bottom line is they have predicted that Elly De La Cruz is going to overtake the likes of Mookie Betts and Francisco Lindor and some of the others, as far as where we sit right now in the National League. Are you surprised that Elly De La Cruz is being given this prediction already as we sit here in February as being the starting shortstop for the National League All-Star Weekend?
No, I'm not. He's on the cover of the show. He went, however many steals last year. He's the favorite to lead the league in steals again this year. He's, I think, minus money to go 30-30. That doesn't surprise me because that's what I think Elly is. I think he's the best shortstop in the National League. I think he's going to be the best shortstop in baseball very, very soon. I think he's absolutely incredible. He was an all-star last year, played more at third than he did at short, and hopefully this year he does get that starting nod. But no, that's not a surprise to me. I think that's exactly where Elly De La Cruz should be viewed as one of the best shortstops in all of the league.
Elly De La Cruz is going to be the face of baseball.
Yeah.
It might not be this year, it might not be next year, but this is a kid right now, and the way he's playing is well beyond his age. I think this guy's going to be the face of the league. The cover of the show is just the beginning. Hopefully it's going to be with the Reds his entire career. I pray and I hope that's going to be the case. But whether or where he's playing, he's going to be the face of baseball, and he's that special. What he can do defensively, what he can do on the base path, and what he can do with his bat, it's a triple threat. The guy's unbelievable. Everybody in baseball wants Elly De La Cruz. Everybody would want Elly on their team. And not a lot of teams have an Elly De La Cruz or really anything remotely close to him. There's a lot of teams out there that will have 100 years of their franchise and not sniff an Elly De La Cruz. The Reds have that guy right now, and he should be overtaking a lot of the names, a lot of the shortstops in Major League Baseball. Because as of right now, he's a top 3 shortstop in the league, and he's going to be the face of the league here soon.
Another spot another spot where a Reds player obviously high up in the mix here as far as these all-star predictions as we head into the 25 season. When you look at the starting pitchers, by the way, outfielders, no Reds in the mix for that. I don't think any of us are surprised. I know, a little bit of a
Austin
surprise.
Hayes?
Yeah, I mean,
They clearly aren't watching spring training.
Seriously.
6 RBIs, 2 home runs. That's my guy. I mean, damn. No, starting pitcher Paul Skeens. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised if that's the case, but they do have Hunter Green as the potential another player along with Wheeler and some others to be competing for that starting spot for the National League. Of course, having that breakout year last year. Talking about Hunter Green, of course, but Hunter Green getting a lot of love. And look, these are the three biggest names the Reds have. It's not a surprise. Matt McClain, Elly De La Cruz, and Hunter Green when it comes to pitching, right there in the mix for those guys. Elly, of course, being predicted to start. Matt McClain contend for that second base spot. And then, obviously, they're talking about the guys that we ranked the other day just to the NL Central, but Skeens and Hunter Green, 1-2 punch in the National League as far as who could potentially be starting for the All-Star game, many months from now, but that's why they called it the way too early predictions at this point.
I hope Hunter Green gets back so he can redeem himself a little bit. Last year was a doozy, but again, exactly where I think Hunter Green belongs. One of the best pitchers in all of baseball. The fact that he was able to post a sub-3 ERA in Great American Ballpark as his home ballpark last year tells you all you need to know about the guy. I mean, the only concern anyone's ever had is how long can he go into games, and last year he was going as long as you needed him to. So, yeah, he's living up to every bit of every expectation he's had, and he's, again, just like I said with Elly, comfortably in my mind one of the best pitchers in baseball.
Hunter Green's my guy, and I'm going to ride for Hunter Green. Did I have doubts at some point before last year whether or not Hunter Green was the guy? Yeah, maybe a little bit. Last year proved and showed to me all that I need to see. Hunter Green is the best pitcher in the National League Central. I'll stand by that take. I don't care. And I think this year it'll just cement it further. The guy can strike out anybody on a whim. He goes deep into games, so the short inning merchant, that narrative is gone. He went 7 innings, I felt like, the entire year last year. And he's one of the best pitchers in baseball. I love him, and I think that he should be in consideration to be an All-Star because he's going to carry this rotation.
Do you think there's a chance he starts? Obviously, there's a chance, but do you think there's a reasonable chance that he's the National League starter?
Yeah, I think there would absolutely be. If the Reds are playing the baseball that we hope that they are up until the midway point, then I'm going to say Hunter Green's going to be a large part of that. And if Hunter Green's a large part of that, he's certainly in the mix to start for the All-Star team. So I'd say yeah. I'm going to say yeah.
Yeah, and to feed off that point, Elliot, you brought up a great point about, to have this chance, the Reds would have to be, competing in the way that we expect them to. And for them to do that, he would have to be at the forefront of that when it comes to the rotation. I don't think the Pirates are going to be that good this upcoming season, although they showed flashes. There was a stretch last year where they were one of the hottest teams in baseball, and they were a fun little storyline to follow for a little bit. That's actually how a lot of eyes got put on Skeens so early on in that season, but obviously they wore down as the season progressed. But I think that because the Reds are going to be more competitive at a higher spot, I think that's going to help push him into that nonetheless. Look, I know some people are saying, what the hell are we talking about the All-Star game for? I just thought it was when I saw that article and I clicked on it and started looking through it, I mean, it was nice seeing that there's enough Reds players getting enough of that national attention that, man, they really could be in the mix for this. Yeah. Let me ask you, this wasn't a planned segment, but while we're on it, is there any names, like, it's not a surprise that Elly De La Cruz, Matt McClain, and Hunter Green are the guys that we're talking about in these spots. Any other Reds players that you think, maybe not competing for a starting spot, but are going to be contending for an All-Star slot, in your opinion, do you think?
I'll say the guy that's been an All-Star before. I think Alexis Diaz, as the closer of the Reds who are on the doorstep of the playoffs, if he can replicate what he did 2 years ago, even a shadow of what he did 2 years ago through the first half of the season, I think he'll certainly be back in the All-Star game. So just because we've seen it before, I feel like that's an easy way to go. But I think there's a lot of candidates in our bullpen that could put together a good enough first half of the season to be in that All-Star roster.
I think Tyler Stevenson would have a chance. I think he's one of the best. He's one of the best catchers in the league. I think there's a chance Nick Martinez, based on his unique position, to be involved in the starting rotation and the bullpen. We'll see how that goes, this year, and God willing, they all stay healthy. But if he's playing both, if he's able to start and be successful, and he's able to come out of the bullpen for 3 innings and be successful there, I think that's a candidate to be an All-Star this season.
Tyler Stevenson, that's a good one. I think everyone makes that mistake with him. He's probably the most underappreciated Red that there is right now.
I would say so.
And he had such a great season last year, such a great season, and always gets overlooked in these conversations. But that's a good one. I like Jake's because, again, Alexis Diaz, we've seen it before. And if the Reds are winning, for them to be winning at the level that we talked about earlier, for Hunter Green to be in the mix for that, that means they're going to have good bullpen performance as well, closing out games and not letting, losing a bunch of one-run games and letting leads slip away. So, yes, I think Diaz, if he's looked at as the closer for this team, he's going to be the one in charge of closing out a lot of these ordeals. So, yeah, I think those are two good names to keep an eye on that aren't getting that look at attention right now, Tyler Stevenson and Alexis Diaz. But, hey, we only have to wait for March, April, May, and June. So we'll find out in 4 months if all this holds true.
That close.
There you go.
Almost there.
There you go. Caddyshack, I love. I do like Caddyshack. Caddyshack's good.
You're just trying to dig yourself out of this hole now.
Caddyshack's a great movie.
I do love Caddyshack.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with Caddyshack. Happy Gilmore, list goes on and on. But
I'm going to need a full list of movies that are great that you don't like.
I could put that together. Just give me time.
Thank you.
Give me time. All right, Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. We'll step away for a few moments. We'll turn our attention towards the NFL. When you start thinking about the expectations already for the AFC North next season, it's blank or bust. Is it playoff or bust, Super Bowl or bust, develop a quarterback or bust? What the hell is it when it comes to the Ravens, the Browns, the Steelers, and your Cincinnati Bengals? We'll be right back. AFC North talk next. Justin Kenner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett. We are back here off the bench. Chatterbox Sports on YouTube. And, of course, Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. Appreciate you guys tuning in and hanging out with us here on a Thursday. We'll turn our attention towards the NFL. Look, we spent a lot of time on the Bengals yesterday. Duke Tobin addressed the media earlier in the week at the NFL Combine, so there was a lot to take away there. He said a lot of things that had a lot of Bengals fans feeling pretty confident about some of the things that are going on behind the scenes as far as keeping the stars locked into this roster while also having the flexibility to add talent to improve upon last year's 9-8 season that ultimately, led to missing the playoffs, of course, but it's a franchise that has Super Bowl expectations. We're going to talk more about that in a second. Charlie Goldsmith, he's going to hang out with us. He's covering the Combine right now. He's put out a lot of great pieces, Charlie's chalkboard, when it comes to, of course, the Cincinnati Bengals and the takeaways from Duke Tobin and company. He also was just at spring training last week, so we'll talk Reds and Bengals with him coming up around the corner. But a lot of eyes are going to be on all things NFL with the Combine this week, and we're going to be dissecting all the different position groups that are competing for spots out there, and curious what the direction that the Bengals are leaning towards when it comes to what they're going to do with the 17th pick in the first round and all the picks they have after that. We'll get to more of that in a second. But expectations, before we even get to the draft and free agency and for these teams have a chance to actually fix their rosters, that we all know what these teams need to do to take that next step and what the goal is for these teams next season. But you look at the AFC North. Let's start with the Baltimore Ravens. The 2025 season for the Baltimore Ravens, the expectations for where they finish the season is what or bust? Is it Super Bowl or bust? Playoffs or bust? Division title or bust? What is the expectation for the Baltimore Ravens in 25?
It's Super Bowl or bust. I don't know what else it could be.
I would agree.
With what Lamar Jackson's done, and I know he didn't win the MVP this year, but a lot of people think he should have. That would have been 3 for him, and nonetheless, 2 is just as impressive. And the lack of postseason success is going to be a burden on his career and how it's viewed, whether we like it or not, whether you think it's right or not, until he wins. And I think they're Super Bowl or bust until Lamar Jackson's not their quarterback. I think that's just how it's going to work in Baltimore, regardless of roster turnover, regardless of aging stars. I think as long as Lamar Jackson's their quarterback until he wins one, they're going to be Super Bowl or bust.
They have the most pressure on them out of anybody in the NFL. They're a really good team. They've been a really good team. They have a really good quarterback, an elite running back. They've got pretty damn good pass-catching options at the moment. They need to be better, and if your expectation is just to make the playoffs with a back-to-back MVP, it's just not good enough. I mean, you got to go further into the playoffs. You got to get to a Super Bowl, and if you're gonna compare quarterbacks in the AFC North, I know Lamar Jackson has the edge based on accolades over Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow got the Bengals, a franchise who is been pretty inept, I would say, over the past 25 years, and they've gotten them to a Super Bowl. So, I know the Bengals have gotten to the playoffs before, and they've been one of the better teams in that. But saying that, they didn't win playoff games for a long time. Joe Burrow got them over that hump, won multiple playoff games, got the Bengals to a Super Bowl. If Lamar Jackson can do that, changes his legacy, his narrative, it changes the Ravens' narrative. Because right now, all the eyes of the world should be on the Baltimore Ravens.
I have a hard time putting Super Bowl or bust expectations on a lot of teams. I think for Lamar, I think it's like Lamar has to continue adding stuff to his resume that he hasn't done yet to this point. Winning a Super Bowl is super key, yes. So Super Bowl is obviously, I think for a legacy of like his with multiple MVPs, could have almost been 3, as you guys mentioned. I think it's AFC Championship or bust, like winning getting to a Super Bowl. Yes, you would expect a guy like that to go win one, obviously, but I think when you look at the fact that Joe Burrow doesn't have the MVPs and some of the stuff that the other guys have, but he's led a team to a Super Bowl. He's led them to back-to-back AFC championships. For Lamar, he's been to an AFC championship, but has yet to win one. He needs to win one, get to the Super Bowl. I think we at least need to see Lamar in the Super Bowl. I think it needs to be AFC championship or bust, and not just getting to the championship game, but like winning it. I think he at least needs to get to the Super Bowl. We could talk about, whether he needs to win it or not. At some point he does. But I think at least getting to a Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes has been to many. Joe Burrow's been to 1. Jalen Hurts has been to 2, and he's won 1, lost 1, of course. I think if you're Lamar Jackson, you have to at least get to a Super Bowl at the very least. So I'll go at least AFC championship or bust when it comes to the Ravens. We're making it a lot about Lamar, but I tell you what, how does Harbaugh just continue to be left off on an island by himself? Like, Lamar is such a polarizing talking point. We don't put Harbaugh in the same category as Mike Tomlin. Every year, Mike Tomlin, it's the same result with them every single season. I feel like you could say the same thing about Harbaugh when it comes to the Ravens. How does he get such a pass in your guys' opinion? Because technically, he was on the hot seat. He was on his way out the door that last year of Joe Flacco. In fact, they announced that they were parting ways with Harbaugh at the end of the season. Then in comes Lamar Jackson around the halfway point. They run the table. They make the playoffs. And Harbaugh keeps his job, and we've never once gone back to revisiting that conversation. How does Harbaugh continue to get a pass with the Ravens at this point?
Yeah, I think that the difference is he's won a Super Bowl more recently. I mean, he's won a Super Bowl post 2010, and I think if you're gonna compare, I guess that's how we're gonna measure it. Did the Steelers win in 2011? When was the Steelers' last Super Bowl? 2009? Anybody know?
I thought it was 2009.
I think it's 2009 too. So I think he won it more recently, and that's pretty much all there is to it. I think you're right. I think there probably should be a lot more pressure on Harbaugh. I would say Harbaugh's probably had more success in the playoffs. Not a ton, but more success than Tomlin, again, since 2010. So that's why, but he should have the same amount of pressure on his head that Tomlin does.
I will tell you, inside Baltimore, it's a lot more pressure than outside of it. I mean, we all talk about how Harbaugh's one of the best coaches in football, and we love the facilities and everything about the organization in Baltimore. But their fan base is starting to get fed up about seemingly spinning their tires with so much talent on that roster. So at least internally with their fan base on social media and everything along those lines, they are not nearly as happy with Harbaugh as the rest of the country would seem to be. They seem to be siding a little bit more with what you're saying there, Kenner.
Yeah, and that would And look at what is interesting and ironic enough about Harbaugh. Without a franchise quarterback, we could debate what Flacco was for the Ravens. He was a Super Bowl winning quarterback for the Ravens, and statistically, it's kind of ironic the numbers he has put up. Like, I don't think we ever view him as this quarterback that put up a ton of yards and stats, but he actually did. But I don't think everyone viewed him as like the way we do Lamar. You could say, he's had more success with a less talented quarterback than with the more talented quarterback in Lamar Jackson. It's just ironic how some of that's worked out. But either way, continuing on the AFC North, blank or bust when it comes up to the 2025 season. Let's go over to Cleveland. The Cleveland Browns. Is it what or bust for the Cleveland Browns? Playoff or bust? Super Bowl. Let's not even go there, obviously. But Super Bowl or bust? Playoff or bust? Division or bust? Wild card or bust? What are we talking when it comes to the Cleveland Browns' expectations in 2025?
I think this is incredibly dependent on who's playing quarterback. If you take Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders at number 2 overall, then the thought process of this team and what the expectations are from this season change drastically, and you're no longer talking about, what the team's goals are. I think the whole team's goal turns into how do we get this rookie quarterback to where we need him to be. So if you go that route, I think all eyes are on that rookie quarterback and his progression all year long. If you go with a veteran like a Sam Darnold or Aaron Rodgers or anyone else on the open market, I think that move is more try to pitch to Myles Garrett that you're not going to be in a rebuild, that you're going to try to compete, and then I think at that point it turns into playoffs or bust, which is a very interesting point for this Browns roster to be in right now if you go that route. So I expect them to take a quarterback at 2, which would put this into development as the number 1 thing.
Yeah, and I don't mean to be disrespectful. I'm just going to say it's bust. I mean, there's no Super Bowl or bust. There's no playoffs or bust. It's just going to be a bust. And that's what it should be when you rebuild. You shouldn't be good. You should be tanking. If I were the Cleveland Browns, I wouldn't draft one of these quarterbacks. I'd wait until next year and see the options. I'd play bad football. I know that sucks to say, but that's where you are right now. And I don't think it makes sense to try to compete with a roster that's just not good enough. And maybe they're good enough to make the playoffs. There's 7 teams that make it now on each side. So sure, they could get a wild card. They could win 9 games and sneak in. But is that what your goal is? Is that what the goal should be? I mean, if your goal is to draft a quarterback and develop, and if it works, great. I wouldn't bet my franchise after what happened with Deshaun Watson on one of these next few guys here this year. Maybe take a quarterback late in the draft and see if that guy can work. But I'd start rebuilding the team everywhere else besides the quarterback position first. And then we'll start to get the quarterback once we have a select group of candidates that we feel is good enough. If they feel Shedeur is good enough, if they feel Cam Ward's good enough, then that's great. And I wish him well. But right now, I really have a hard time believing that the Cleveland Browns are betting on their entire franchise on one of these 2 guys.
I think unless they're in love with Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, at least in my opinion, I think there's much more value for a team like the Browns to use pick 2 on someone that can, help your team more immediately, and then take a Quinn Ewers or a Will Howard on day 3. I think that's a route that would really intrigue me for the Browns and give them that new quarterback to try without using a ton of capital and putting all your eggs in one basket when you don't have a ton of draft capital to work with. So I think we could see them, waiting to draft a quarterback later in the draft as well. I'd be shocked if they left this draft without a quarterback. I think they're going to try to figure that out whatever way it is, whether it's at 2 or whether it's in the second round. So that would obviously change it as well wherever you draft said quarterback.
Yeah, I think this conversation could be a lot different in July than what it is now. The problem is I think they're the most confused team in the AFC North as far as who the hell they are. Like, they need to hit the reset button, but I can't. Elliot, you talked about them being, talk about the rebuild. I don't think they view themselves as rebuilding. Because if they view themselves as rebuilding, and remember, as we sit here in February, they very well could trade Myles Garrett. They very well could trade Denzel Ward and move on from these guys to accrue a bunch of draft picks. But as of right now, it's not sounding like it. I mean, the Browns were in on the mix, not in on, but when you talked about the teams that have reached out to the Rams regarding Matthew Stafford, that doesn't sound like a team that's rebuilding. You're not reaching out to give up draft picks to go get a Matthew Stafford, an aging quarterback. That's a win now mode. That's a quarterback you're trying to bring in to help you win now. If they go after a Kirk Cousins, I'm not saying Kirk Cousins is still an elite level quarterback, but if he plays like he was expected to heading into Atlanta last year, that's not a move that's rebuilding to me. That's a move that's trying to win now with some of the pieces that they have to keep a Myles Garrett and company. So for me, I do believe if they go the drafting the quarterback route, it's not playoff or bust, Super Bowl or bust, or a benchmark of wins or bust. It's That quarterback, it needs to be that Baker Mayfield season. It needs to be Baker Mayfield's rookie season or bust, where they didn't come close to making the playoffs, but you would have felt that we won the damn Super Bowl that year because we were so jacked to see a quarterback come in, and it looked like we finally had that guy, right? I think it has to be if you take Shador or you take a quarterback like a Quinn Ewers or someone later in the draft, that quarterback needs to look like there's some promise there by the end of the year or bust. Otherwise, Stefanski's out, and it's all going to be blown up after this upcoming season. So they're the hardest team to figure out because I don't think they know who the hell they want to be. If Myles Garrett truly does get moved, they're rebuilding. You need to move on from as many pieces as possible, accrue draft picks, and start over. But if not, I don't see how. I mean, then you have to change the expectation. It has to be playoff or bust. If you're not going to trade Myles Garrett, you're not going to trade Denzel Ward, you're not going to accrue draft picks, you're not rebuilding, which means you're trying to win now. And if you're not winning now, you're failing. So therefore, it's playoff or bust for me at the end of the day when it comes to Cleveland. So we'll see what happens there.
I certainly agree.
All right,
you go get one of those veterans.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like that's, you know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
one thing. I think we're all on the same page. This team needs to rebuild. But if they go get a veteran quarterback, and again, there's different veteran quarterbacks. There is your quarterback to just come in and just have experience in the NFL, like an Andy Dalton, to run the offense, just, be in control a little bit. But if you're going to get a Kirk Cousins, that's a guy you're bringing in that you hope could put up big yards and help you win now. If you're going to get a Matthew Stafford, that's a win now mode.
Yeah.
They'll tell us by their actions, in the free agent market more than anything.
I guess
the
question I'd have for you on that is, excluding Matthew Stafford, all the other names you said, excluding Matthew Stafford, playoffs or bust, absolutely agree. What's the ceiling of a Kirk Cousins-led Browns team? Like one playoff win?
I just think a playoff appearance, as sad as that sounds at this point, but but Myles Garrett's not coming back to play for one playoff win.
But that's what I mean. So what do you really gain by trading for, a Kirk Cousins or something along those lines? The ceiling of that would be, getting to the divisional round, or maybe you get lucky and somehow you get to an AFC championship. But there's no way a Kirk Cousins-led Browns team is beating, a healthy Bengals or Ravens or Chiefs or any of those Bills, the other contenders in the AFC. I think the Browns would benefit so greatly from just entering a full rebuild. They get assets, get a new quarterback, start over. It's the only chance, I think, to save some of the really exciting young players, the back half of some of those really exciting young players' careers. If you're able to hold on to, a Denzel Ward or a JOK while in a rebuild, maybe you can be competitive while they're still at the back end of their prime.
I think it comes more down to their defense than anything, too. Like Kirk Cousins coming in with what was there last year, it ain't going to matter. That ain't going to matter. But that defense, they have to figure out, they have to patch some holes on that defense and get it back to where it was 2 years ago. If you get that defense back to being a legit top 5 defense in the NFL, then you can start to compete with any of those teams. Not saying that they'd be favored, not saying that they're better than the Bengals, but they could beat the Bengals if that defense goes back to being top 5. You could compete with the Chiefs. You can compete with these teams. Their defense took that step back last year. Look, they made the playoffs at 5 different quarterbacks 2 years ago, but it was because of that defense. Right. That defense took a major step back last year. It didn't matter who the quarterback was. They weren't winning football games. So we'll see. They're not close to a Super Bowl, though. So at the end of the day, that doesn't matter. And if that's not what they're about competing for, then you're right. You might as well just hit the blow-up button when it's all said and done.
That's the age-old NFL debate.
That's
if
right.
You can't win a Super Bowl, might as well just blow it up, no matter how close you are.
That's right.
And that's perfect because that leads us to our next team, which is the Pittsburgh Steelers, which we're going to touch on them. We're going to wrap it up with this, with the Steelers and the Bengals on the other side. Again, blank or bust. Expectations are what or bust for the Pittsburgh Steelers and your Cincinnati Bengals. We'll get to that when we come back. More Off the Bench next. Mighty Ducks. I love the Mighty Ducks.
You know what? I don't think
Does
I've
that
ever
count?
seen the Mighty. I don't think I've seen the Mighty Ducks.
What?
I haven't seen the Mighty Ducks in forever, but I watched it when I was
Quack, 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 quack. Come on.
Never
I'll
seen the
have
Mighty
to rewatch
Ducks.
that one. I'll have to
That's one I
rewatch
haven't seen. They did the remake of it. I think
They
they
did.
did like a show or something.
Not the
They've
same.
I think there's like 4 of them.
There might be. I think there is 4 of them. And then they did the show. I think John Stamos was like the lead of the show.
Oh wow.
I think I'm thinking of the right thing.
But we welcome you back. Off the bench. It has Friday feels today, but we have a whole Friday show to go still to close
Yeah,
out
that's
the
the
week.
thing, isn't it?
That's the thing.
It's not Friday.
Not yet, but it feels like it.
It does, which might be worse.
Did we go over our week rankings with Kinner yet? Did we do
We
that?
didn't, but we should maybe save that till.
Come on, that's a great segment. The radio
All right.
people. Kinner, rank your days of the
What?
week. Rank your days of the week. This is mine. I'll give you some time. My days of the week ranking. Number 1, Friday night. Number 2, Friday. Number 3, Saturday. Number 4, Thursday. 5, Sunday. Or excuse me, 5.
5 Saturday night.
5 Saturday night, and then Sunday, and then it's Tuesday or Monday, and then Wednesday. Tuesday's the worst day of the week.
Yeah, you get all that?
Did you write it down?
I mean, you combined. you cheated a little. You could combine days, but I'll go.
There's 10
obviously,
days in the week. Monday or
Oh,
Friday and
that makes
Sunday
sense.
split. It's 2 different
That
fields.
makes
okay,
sense.
okay, I see.
You did it, not me.
I tried.
I would go Friday night 1, Saturday 2. I know this sounds. I love Mondays. Mondays don't bother me at all. I like Mondays. I like
We
getting
agreed
to a
Mondays.
Monday.
Mondays get a bad rap. Tuesday, distantly the worst.
Tuesdays is the worst. I'll go.
Tuesday's the worst.
Thursday's not bad. Like today, I think we're. It's like, it's Thursday. Good. Tomorrow's Friday, and we're done.
Severance Day.
You know? So
It is
what you said.
Severance Day. I forgot it
So
was Severance Day. My favorite part about Severance Day, Kinner, is that they say it's on Friday, but it's always on Thursday.
Not even late. At
No, it's 9 p.m.
Are you guys up that late to watch
Yeah,
that?
Yeah.
yeah.
What time do you guys go to? I'm a night owl. I can't sleep half the damn time. So
I'm
1 a.m.
I'm an 11:30 midnight guy.
1 a.m.
you're a 1 a.m. We were thinking about moving the show up to 8 a.m.
We should try it. Let's see if it works.
I like
I'm in.
sleep
Oh, I'm
after.
sorry, 8:10. I'm sorry, 8:10 a.m. 8:10 a.m. Sorry,
8:10.
8:10. Around 8:10.
Listed
Yeah.
as 8.
Yeah, correct.
All right, carrying on here again, our expectations for teams out of the AFC North. We checked off the Ravens and the Browns. Let's move over to the Pittsburgh Steelers, because if you're not competing for a championship, for a Super Bowl, then what are you competing for? And that's the question I keep having about Mike Tomlin's led Pittsburgh Steelers for quite some time now. They take a lot of pride in the fact that Mike Tomlin has never had a season under 500. I think after last season, we were so confident that that was going to be the season when you looked at that gauntlet of a schedule in the back where they had to play every AFC North team twice. They had to play the Chiefs. They had to play the Eagles. They still somehow finished above 500. They still somehow made the playoffs. It was absolutely ridiculous. It pissed me off. So I'm never going to bet against Mike Tomlin finishing below 500 again. I'm just leaving that alone. But that seems to be their banner that they hang every year. That seems to be the only thing that franchise truly values at this point, because they seem to truly value running in place, just having a top-level defense that will put you in position to win 9 to 10 football games, barely make the playoffs in the wild card consistently, sometimes missing the playoffs. But, hey, it's the Steeler way. They're competitive. They're never going to accept a losing season just to improve their draft stock. However you want to word it, pride gets in their way, stubbornness gets in their way. At some point, they have to make a decision of who they want to be, and continuing to roll out the Justin Fields of the world and others. While Fields may be a better option than most, is Justin Fields truly a Super Bowl caliber quarterback? I don't think anybody puts him in that category. So if every decision you make is not about trying to win a Super Bowl, then who the hell are you? The Pittsburgh Steelers are what in 2025? Are they playoff or bust, AFC North title or bust, AFC Championship or bust, Super Bowl? Who are the Pittsburgh Steelers, at least as of now, before we get to free agency and the draft?
Pick top 10 or bust?
Yeah, I agree.
Have to be bad.
I
Have to be
agree.
bad. Next year's quarterback class is very exciting. None of the connections to the Steelers have moved me at all in terms of thinking they're going to be a contender this year. I think the only way the Steelers can ever take a step forward, and I've said this many, many times talking about this team, is they have to be really bad.
Yeah.
They have to pick top 5. They have to pick top 10 and be willing to move up. I don't know what the exact number is, but they have to get an elite quarterback in next year's draft. And that means this year, don't win 9 games and lose them in the first round. That does you no good. You've done it for a decade, and it's gotten you nowhere. So I think the biggest thing for them this year is to be bad, as weird as that sounds.
I truly believe this, and Kenner, you're going to like this take, I think. I think the Steelers are by far and away, the worst positioned team for the future in this division. They don't have a quarterback. I know the Browns don't have a quarterback, but I think everybody knows what the Browns are. The Browns are trying to rebuild. They know Deshaun wasn't the guy, so they're going to go out and they're going to try to get one. The Steelers are playing this game where we're just going to fight and be 500. We're going to start every season really, really hot, and then we're going to lose out every single time. Like it's the reverse Bengals, and it's a bad place to be. It's a bad place to be. If you had to rank, franchises in the NFL, like where their future holds, Steelers are in the bottom for sure. I know they're not the worst because they make the playoffs and they've had success. But, man, it would be incredibly frustrating to know every season that you're good enough to make the playoffs, but you have a 0.0% chance to ever win a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Look, I've said before, it is weird with the perception of Zach Taylor and Mike Tomlin. I'm not saying Zach Taylor's a better head coach than Mike Tomlin, but I'd much rather have the Zach Taylor effect than the Mike Tomlin effect, where I know you guys would wish the Bengals would get out to a much hotter start, but again, if you're like the Steelers, they get out to that hot start every year and they plummet at the worst time. They plummet at the time too, like where they do so much work at the beginning of the season that they still make the playoffs despite playing horrible football. But the bottom line is, even when they make the playoffs, because they're playing horrible football heading into the playoffs, they don't have a shot. They don't have a shot. Like the Bengals last year played horrible football to start, but they were one of the hottest teams, if not the hottest team in football heading into the playoffs. Had they made it, it would not have been a shock at all to see them get to the AFC Championship game or possibly knock off the Chiefs because they play them close every time. It's a drastically different problem, if you will, the Bengals and the Steelers both have. Yeah, the Steelers, the other problem that they have too, and again, no one's picking the franchise of the Steelers or the Browns over the Steelers, but the Browns also have an owner that, if they get lucky, they have an owner that spends a ton of money. They'll buy themselves out of problems, sometimes to a fault, obviously, like we saw with Deshaun. The Steelers they don't throw around money. They're not super aggressive in free agency. They're not super aggressive in the draft as far as, they're not super aggressive when it comes to getting a quarterback. They just run in place constantly. I don't know. So one more time, they are picking the top 10 or bust. Is that what you guys are saying?
That's where I'm sticking.
You got to find a quarterback or bust.
Yeah.
Be bad enough to find a quarterback or bust.
Or go spend stupid money in a trade, or assets, not necessarily money, but assets in a trade to go get someone that's good. They were linked to Trevor Lawrence earlier this summer, which leads me to believe that maybe they understand where they're at and they have to swing big at quarterback. But to have T.J. Watt on your team and not have a chance to win anything because you don't have a quarterback, that just never made any sense to me.
The 49ers are like the super version of the Steelers, right? They build their entire roster with, a lack of a quarterback, and they hope that's enough. And the 49ers have literally every position filled with Pro Bowlers, every single position, and even Brock Purdy's a solid quarterback. That's still not enough to win a Super Bowl. So what do the Steelers think they're doing?
They're going to sign Brock Purdy.
I guess, maybe. We'll get Brock Purdy or trade for Trevor Lawrence. Good luck to them.
They need their own Mr. Irrelevant.
That's right.
At this point.
They did not want Rodgers, so Rodgers has reached out to other teams.
I can't wait to watch them draft Ashton GT. That's going to just make my night on the first round. Although that might be a good get for them, but either way. All right, continuing on to wrap it up, your Cincinnati Bengals, obviously lots to be made about, what they're going to do this upcoming offseason. You've heard the plan from Duke Tobin, but the perception of the Bengals is what at this point? Are they, Duke Tobin said it, that they're a championship-level franchise. They're pissed off that they didn't even make the playoffs last year. They are what or bust? The Cincinnati Bengals are playoff or bust, Super Bowl or bust. What are the Cincinnati Bengals' expectations in 25?
They have to make the playoffs. Yeah. If they do not make the playoffs, burn it all down. Burn everything. Because you can't do it. You can't miss the playoffs 3 straight times. I just made fun of the Steelers as one of the worst franchises for the future because they make the playoffs and don't have a quarterback. We have the quarterback and don't make the playoffs. So what does that make the Bengals if they don't do it again this year? We're in a bad spot. They have to make the postseason. They have to. If they do not make the postseason, we're going to have a lot of tough conversations in the offseason. A lot of tough conversations.
I would love to put Super Bowl or bust on the Bengals, and I certainly would have going into last season. But after missing the playoffs 2 years in a row, I don't think you can. I don't think they've earned that label anymore. I think Elliott's exactly right. You have to make the playoffs. I'll go a different direction just to change it up. I'll say 2-1 or bust. You got to start the season with a winning record through the first 3 weeks. I think we saw this year how much that can bite you a little bit more than I ever expected it to. Obviously, the last 2 years before that, we were able to claw our way out of that hole. It wasn't the case this past season. So I think Zach Taylor and Duke Tobin recognizing how much of a problem the slow starts were, I'll say start fast or bust. You have to get out of the gates quick, give yourself a chance to compete, and evidently make the playoffs, which is the real barometer of how successful the season's going to be. And if the Bengals get into the playoffs, I don't know, where the point is where I'd be shocked with them getting. I think once they get to the dance, there's nothing along the way that would shock me. So it's playoffs or bust, and I think that comes with not starting slow anymore.
Yeah, I think a team that's missed the playoffs 2 years in a row, it's a hard label to put on them as Super Bowl or bust. Now, let's see what they do with this offseason, because we've made so much about Trey Hendrickson, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase. No, they very much can surprise the hell out of everybody and add some big names in free agency and kick the hell out of this draft. And all of a sudden, we're having a much different conversation, in July, heading into camp and everything else along those lines. But for right now, I think it has to be playoff or bust. If we want to have discussions about how if they have an ugly exit out of the playoffs, fine. Those are much better problems to have. Those are much better problems to have of, oh man, we're getting to the playoffs, but I hate the fact that we didn't get a playoff win or didn't advance to the playoffs. Those are much better problems to have. You need to get to those problems before you can get to others. So I think that it, at the very least, has to be playoff or bust for the Cincinnati Bengals. But the thing is, if the Bengals are good enough to make the playoffs, they're going to be good enough to make the playoffs because of that offense, because of Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and just a complimentary defense. Man, they make the playoffs. It's hard to not put a AFC or a Super Bowl or bust label on them, because if they're good enough to make the playoffs, that means they're good enough to go on a run. Last year, they didn't make the playoffs, but that team is still better than half the teams that made the postseason, which is wild to say. I don't know if you could say that about many teams in the history of the NFL, teams that missed the playoffs, but you felt confident were better than some of the teams that were in the field. You can name 5 teams the Bengals probably had a better chance at getting wins that wild card weekend or first round weekend than the teams that made it. But that's just the reality of where they sit right now.
Yeah, I wish you could still say Super Bowl or bust. That was a good
Window.
window.
Can't say it anymore.
But yeah, got to get back to the playoffs before we can get back to that.
All right, we'll talk more Bengals. We'll talk some Reds with Charlie Goldsmith coming up here in just about 15 minutes or so. Charlie Goldsmith will hang out with us coming up here shortly. Let's get to a little buy or sell. We'll be right back. We're off the bench when we come back. Charlie Goldsmith will join us coming up here shortly. We'll talk Bengals and Reds with him. He's at the NFL Combine, giving us some time today. Pretty cool. Appreciate him as always. All right, little buy or sell. NFL draft. I know this is going to be one of the bigger talking points throughout the week. Abdul Carter, one of the biggest names to look for in this draft at the very top. In fact, I think it's creating a lot of havoc for teams who need quarterbacks, but I think he could be better than any quarterback that's available at the top of the draft. I've said this, the Browns have the number 2 pick. that may sound like a great thing, but it's kind of a bad thing, because I think that there are prospects like, of course, a Travis Hunter or an Abdul Carter that will probably be better for you long term than forcing a quarterback. And of course, a Cam Ward or, of course, a Shedeur Sanders at this point. So Abdul Carter has been a big talking point for a while heading into this draft, but now he's going to be a big talking point for different reasons. There's been some reports that have come out, maybe a little bit more positive one that came out earlier today, but foot surgery might possibly be needed for Abdul Carter. They was trying to get second opinions, trying to, evaluate whether or not he, should work out or get the surgery now, be out about 8 weeks, and then hit the ground running again. Regardless, with all the noise about the foot injury, and we know how important that foot is for him to be the dynamic player that he's expected to be, with all the noise about the possibility of this being a big deal, buy or sell Abdul Carter dropping in the draft coming up in April?
I'm going to buy it because I think it was already a coin flip with him healthy.
Yeah.
I think him going number one was a 50-50 shot with a quarterback for the Titans, with him fully healthy, going through the combine, going through his pro day, and testing through the roof. So the fact that we're not going to get to see that, I'll buy it. Only buying it within the top 5. He's not dropping to the Bengals range or anything along those lines, but I do not think he's going to go number 1 overall anymore with the looming surgery.
I'm also going to buy it. I just think there's too much resting on that pick to take a guy that is dealing with injury. I think there's no way in any franchise's mind, especially a franchise that's bad enough to have the number 1 overall pick, that they're going to take that risk, move forward in the future with a guy that's dealing with injuries. It's no knock on him. It's just, you can't bet on somebody that's hurt.
I do think this can change pretty drastically if he goes out to his pro day and looks fine.
Sure.
If he goes out and proves that he doesn't need the surgery, that this is something that doesn't hold him back, I think that can absolutely put him right back in those conversations. But it's going to be pretty telling about who Tennessee sends to that Penn State pro day. If they send their owners and their head coach, then maybe he's still in the mix. If they send some lower level scouts, probably not. So something to keep an eye on as we get down there, because that's the only point we're going to be able to see Abdul Carter test.
Unfortunate for him. It might be fortunate for some teams, only because if it was a coin flip of, do we go Shedeur or Cam, or do we go Abdul? I think, man, that might be enough to scare off teams at the very, very top. If it was a coin flip, if it really was like the Titans, as you mentioned, Abdul Carter or a Cam Ward, man, I don't know. What do we do? Man, the possibility of this lingering issue, and again, just because he doesn't need surgery now, who's to say it won't need it later? And that's a little concerning. We saw how deflating it was for the Vikings, who get what they were hoping would be a franchise caliber quarterback in J.J. McCarthy when they draft him. It deflated them, of course, when it came out that he was out for the season. Now, Sam Darnold goes out and balls out, and, of course, they have a great regular season, but that's besides the point. You just want to be careful with this if you are the Titans, Browns, or anybody who's looking at Abdul Carter. I think he'll drop a little. I still think he's taken in the top 10. I just now do not think he will go 1 or 2 just because of this. I think there was a higher chance of that before, so I'm going to buy him dropping. But, again, significant drop out of the top 10, I don't see that being the case.
Yeah, 100% agreed. Another top prospect said that he will not be working out, just doing the bench press. Mason Graham, the 2nd overall defensive player behind Abdul Carter, the Michigan defensive tackle, said that he is not going to do anything but the bench press at the combine. So a lot of those top prospects opting out of the on-field testing and everything along those lines. So maybe it just doesn't matter as much anymore.
How much does the bench press matter?
It matters a lot for the interior guys.
Really?
You got to think that's the motion.
Yeah.
More often than not for linemen. So it means more for the linemen than anyone else, but also none of it in shorts means more than playing football.
Yeah.
And keep in mind too, a lot of these guys when they go to a team's pro day, like Ohio State's pro day, Colorado. We talked about Shedeur yesterday on the show. He's not going to throw at the combine, but he's going to throw at Colorado's pro day, and that led to a lot of conversation about whether that was the right or wrong decision. The combine is meant to be just a convenient weekend where all teams can come in and evaluate all the talent that's going to be, eligible for the draft is going to be there working out, putting all their talents on display for the entire league to see if they wanted to be there. It's a lot more difficult sometimes. You kind of learn more about the direction of teams on the individual team workouts, because those are the workouts that you see teams stop what they're doing to make an effort to go watch those if they have the time to do it. Now, some teams, we talked about the Bengals' limited scouting staff, a little bit more difficult for them to go hit a bunch of different pro days at one time when they have such a small team for that at the end of the day. But Man, I don't know. The combine, we've seen more and more players opt out of a lot of these exercises over recent years. You just wonder how much longer the combine is going to be around. I don't think we're close to losing it, but I think this is the start of it. This is another year where some of the big players are coming out saying, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to participate in this drill. Is that a big deal to you?
I don't think we'd ever lose the combine. I do think it's a big deal because I think it's changing what the combine is. As someone that really enjoys the combine and watching it, I think it is going to change pretty drastically over the next couple of years to where top prospects only do their pro days. I don't think the consensus top 10 picks, the no-brainer first rounders, are going to be going to the combine very often anymore. They'll be going to get their measurements and do their interviews, but the on-field workouts is going to be, I think, in the near future, spent on day 2 and day 3 picks trying to work their way up the board. And that's why I don't think they would ever do away with the combine. It means so much to those players in that day 2, day 3 range that you would be kneecapping them from potentially earning millions of dollars by testing well. I understand it doesn't mean a lot for guys like Abdul Carter or Mason Graham or Shador Sanders even, but for the lower level guys, the mid-level guys, it can change their lives. So I don't think the combine is going to go anywhere, but what it is as a top player showcase, I think that will change in the near future.
Fair enough. Buy or sell, moving on. Urban Meyer on his podcast recently said that he believes that Jeremiah Smith is good enough to win the Heisman in 2025. Good enough, yes, absolutely. But, I mean, will he do it? Buy or sell, Buckeyes elite star wide receiver Jeremiah Smith winning the Heisman in 25.
I'm going to sell it because of how much I love Carnell Tate and Mylan Graham and Brandon Innes and, James Peoples, the running back. I think Ohio State's roster this year is every bit as good as it was last year, talking about offensive weapons, even though you lose Emeka Ibuka and both the running backs, Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. But I think everyone you're bringing in is elite. I mean, these are 5-star receivers surrounding Jeremiah Smith. And, I mean, the wide receiver we saw won it in Devontae Smith. It took an injury to Jalen Waddle earlier in that season for him to accrue the counting numbers to get that award. So I just don't think that's going to be the case for Jeremiah Smith because I have a lot of expectations for the production of the other receivers on that Ohio State offense. I think Julian Sainz going to be incredible, throw for 250 million yards, but I just don't think enough of that offense is going to run through Jeremiah Smith as opposed to the other guys for him to hold that trophy at the end. But I think the offense at Ohio State is going to be absolutely incredible.
I'm going to sell it just because I think it's a hard thing to do for a wide receiver to win the Heisman. How many wide receivers have won the Heisman over the last 25 years?
Smitty was the first in a long time.
I was going to say Devontae Smith had been the first in a long time. I'm going to sell it just because it's nearly impossible to do. Saying that, I think Mark Fetters in the chat made the joke, tank for Jeremiah Smith. I would love Jeremiah Smith. Whatever I could do to have the Bengals get Jeremiah Smith, if we want to trade picks, fine by me. Give me Jeremiah Smith because that would be absolutely incredible. But in terms of him winning the Heisman, I think it's just too unlikely. I'll take a quarterback minus $10 million.
Yeah.
I'm going to sell it because I think the kid's going to have a special season and would not be surprised. And for him to have the numbers to be in contention for the Heisman, that means Julian Sayin is going to have that same type of caliber season as well. A couple years ago, Kyle McCord had average numbers, and we saw Marvin Harrison Jr. technically be up for it. But that offense had a lot of limitations as well. I think that this offense is going to be better than that season with Marvin Harrison Jr. So I think I could see Julian Sayin and Jeremiah Smith be invited to the Heisman, obviously presentation, but I don't see him winning it. I'm going to sell it. It's not because he's not good enough, but the quarterbacks for next season too, it's going to be a much better quarterback season for college football next year than this year. There was just a lot of really good quarterbacks in college football this year. A lot of guys opted to return. I think Arch Manning, obviously that's an easy one to throw out there, but there's a lot of really good quarterbacks that are returning for another year. I expect a lot more quarterbacks, if not all quarterbacks, to be in the mix for the Heisman next season. I think there's a reason you saw a running back in the mix this year. There were some questionable guys invited to New York for that. At the end of the day, I just don't see it getting done. Not because he's not good enough. It just doesn't happen. You have to have a special season while there's a down year for quarterbacks. I just don't think that's going to be next season when it's all
I also think with Jeremiah Smith, something that's going to hold him back next year is he's coming back the year after. And if he puts together another season next season like he did this year in his freshman season, he'll absolutely be in New York as a junior to give him, those accolades for what he did in his career. But he's going to have to put together a really special season next year, which he absolutely could. And if I had to bet on it, I'd bet that he's in New York for that ceremony. I just don't think he can get over the hump and win it.
All right. Again, I know we'll be joined by Charlie Goldsmith coming up here shortly. Let's do one more. Rick Pitino and St. John's just clinched the Big East, by the way. And Rick Pitino is now the first head coach in Division I history to win a regular season conference title with 5 different programs: Boston University, Kentucky, Louisville, Iona, and St. John's. Buy or sell, Rick Pitino, the best head coach in college basketball right now?
I'll tell you what. There aren't many guys I'd take above him.
He has the best active resume.
And he's got what, 2 championships, one asterisk?
One asterisk.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly have him up there. I think Bill Self is pretty damn good, but yeah, I'd probably take Rick Pitino, man. He's unbelievable. Every program he touches turns to gold. If UC would hire him, I'd do backflips in the streets. So I mean, he's absolutely incredible. I don't know if he would be the best active coach right now, just because, for the future or whatever. If you're talking about if I need one season, who am I going to bet my life on? I would certainly bet it on Rick Pitino to have a good year. So he's just that good. He's just that good. I'll buy it.
Yeah, I think I'll buy it too. What he's done at St. John's with such a quick turnaround in year 2, it's so impressive. And a lot of people didn't believe in him. He's proven he's still an elite coach at his old age.
The guy, I mean, I'm going to buy it. He's doing this it's not like he went to an established university, established program that, just carrying on. It's not like he went back to Kentucky and Kentucky's #1 in the country and they win the SEC and all this. He's doing this at St. John's, which has not been done in decades. And for him to do it, selling out Madison Square Garden, and for him to do it in today's era, he was one of those old school coaches that you're like, man, how would he handle coaching in today's college basketball? A lot of people believe Coach K and Roy Williams and others, they left college basketball because of the ever-going changing dynamic with the NIL and the transfer portal and everything. Now I wanted to see what he does in March, don't get me wrong, with the tournament, but as of right now, to come win the Big East and to do it at St. John's and to do it, back-to-back schools he's been at like he did at Iona, I can't pick another coach over him at this point. I'm a big Rick Pitino guy. I think he's the #1 coach in college basketball at this point. But let's see what they do with the NCAA tournament. All right, we'll step away for a few. We're going to be joined by Charlie Goldsmith. Again, he spent a week in Arizona at spring training, so we'll talk some Reds with him as well as what he's witnessed at the NFL Combine thus far. We'll be right back. More Off the Bench next. He's the busiest guy in sports media. 1 second he's at spring training in Arizona. The next he's in the beautiful city of Indianapolis. I guess at the Combine. Where are you joining us from? Charlie Goldsmith joining us now. Charlie, where are you joining us from today?
I am in a gathering area next to the media workroom, I guess would be the best way to describe this. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Look, we appreciate you giving us time. We'll get to the Reds in a moment. I know you covered spring training last week, and the Reds, very exciting team right now. We'll talk about them in a moment. The NFL Combine, Cincinnati Bengals, no shortage of storylines there. I'm sure there's plenty for you to be covering right now. Just your overall takeaway from the demeanor and the message from Duke Tobin. Were you surprised about anything that he said in his media availability earlier in the week? Are you shocked about anything at this point? What was your overall takeaway from how he addressed the media at the Combine?
Yeah, definitely. Maybe surprise is too strong of a word, but it was a completely different message than we had heard about Higgins extensions, and even Hendrickson was stronger language, and Jamar saying that they'd make him the highest paid receiver in the league. And it's very clear that Duke Tobin has a specific set of deals that he'd like to get done. And it's funny, so he's up there on the podium and I have my notebook, and if you've seen me out in the field, you know that I carry a big school style notebook, a bigger school style notebook, because I have big handwriting, and that's why I take my notes and know what's going and keep track of what's going on. When Duke was talking, I actually flipped the page and started a new page, and I wrote in all caps, "Don't blow this." there was a lot of confidence. But with it, the thing I couldn't stop thinking about was there's even more pressure now to get these deals done. They know exactly what they want. They're on the same page with their quarterback, but it's on the desk of the front office and ownership to execute it. Ultimately, these decisions are even higher level than the people we've spoken to this week in terms of what they'll guarantee, how aggressive they'll go, how the new salary cap numbers impact all this. And again, we know what they like to do. It's just about whether or not they're going to be able to fit it all in. They've got the cap space, but are they willing to be that aggressive to get the moves they've got to get done?
Duke Tobin exuded that confidence that you talked about there during his combine interview, but there was a report yesterday that if the Bengals can't meet Trey Hendrickson's asking price, it's a sense around the league that they will trade him rather than have him play out the last year of that contract. Where has this necessarily come from over the last couple days, and do you expect the Bengals to break their mold on 30-plus-year-old extensions to keep Trey Hendrickson around?
Yeah, Trey Hendrickson, the tone on him certainly wasn't what it usually is for a superstar player or for a star Pro Bowl All-Pro player who's under contract, which is he makes our team better, no chance that we'd move on from him. That was the tone, for example, with Higgins in 2022. I believe the truth with Trey is somewhere in the middle. Duke Tobin said that they're talking to Trey about an extension. So the fact that that's happening shows that, sure, there is some interest there. It's not like they would not want him under a new contract heading into the future. But the fact that he also didn't turn down, shut down the trade conversation shows that, if someone calls with a first-round pick, things probably get very interesting. I've planted my flag. I think the best decision for the Bengals would be trading Hendrickson, reinvesting in a younger defensive end who could represent kind of the future wave of that room. That ideally you're building a defense that carries forward for the next 4 seasons, a unit that restarts now and builds kind of and grows together, and then using the draft capital that you would get to help reset and rebuild this defense as well. I believe in the power of that. With where the Bengals are at, what I believe is that the truth is in the middle based on how the specific details of the negotiations from a free agent and trade perspective will go.
We saw Sheldon Rankins get cut yesterday, the first answer to a litany of Bengals roster questions this offseason. A lot of other names we've thrown out there. Some have slid down that list since the last time we spoke. Geno Stone, seemingly sure thing to run it back at the safety position for the Cincinnati Bengals. When do you expect us to start hearing about some of these other cuts we expect, or will they still be coming at all?
What's a good example? Trey Hopkins is a good example of this. 2022, or heading into 2022 after the Super Bowl, I believe the timing was they signed Karras, and then once they had the bird in the hand, they cut Trey Hopkins. Okay. I wouldn't be surprised to see that similar strategy as well. They didn't cut Andy Dalton until they drafted Joe Burrow. So that timing would make a lot of sense. But listen, when we talk to Bengals coaches this week, when they're doing their press conferences, the name, and everybody loves Sam Hubbard. I'd actually bring Sam Hubbard back to be this team's 5th defensive end this year. I planted my flag there as well. But the name Sam Hubbard, Jermaine Pratt, to an extent, Geno Stone hasn't been really talked about at all. When they talked about the future of the safety room, I get the sense that it's very much to be determined there as opposed to one way or another. Alex Kappa has been glossed over in every media conversation, with the Bengals guys. So, certainly the expectation is they'll open up some more cap room.
We saw this morning that Abdul Carter had a foot injury pop up. Mason Graham only doing the bench press. Yesterday, Walter Nolan said that he had some things to clean up before he was comfortable doing on-field testing for NFL scouts. How much does that on-field testing at the Combine still matter for NFL teams? Will these players start plummeting down boards? And for the Bengals specifically, how much does seeing them this weekend in Indianapolis really swing them, especially in the early rounds of the draft?
Well, it depends on who you are. There are some guys who, if they fall and it's a top 5 talent available to you with Bengals pick in the middle of the first round, they're high on Amarius Mims, for example. I don't know that they needed to see Mims do anything at the Combine. Even also, he was coming off the ankle injury. There was some minor medical stuff that kind of he had on his resume. And that was a big part of the reason why he slid to them, and they were happy to go out and take him, and they think they've got a future Pro Bowler. So it depends on the player. If you're Amarius Mims, you'll be just fine. If you're, a lower end first round type, and this decreases your stock more, well, certainly that has an impact. It really does depend on the player, from my experience.
We see the Bengals meet with a lot of the first-round defensive ends yesterday. Started off today with a report that they met with Malachi Starks, consensus first-round safety out of Georgia. How much do these meetings entail who they're going to take early in the draft? It seems in the past, obviously, the players they've taken in the first round, they've met with multiple times. Is this a good way to look at where the Bengals board is starting to shape up, or is it reading too deep into just the first couple days of the Combine?
Well, here's what we don't know. We don't know how these meetings went. And, of course, The player's always going to say it went well. But I can guarantee you this. When the Bengals have a great meeting, see Chris Jenkins, see Jordan Battle, I'm sure I could come up with 10 other examples from the past couple of years. Logan Wilson knocked it out of the park at the Senior Bowl. That really, really matters. If it's a bad meeting or if it's just something that doesn't get reported, well, who knows? If we knew for a fact the meetings went well, I would be putting a lot of stock into it. But since we don't have all that information, it's probably too soon to say in a lot of cases.
Charlie Goldsmith giving us some time here today off the bench. Justin Kinner, Elliot Ruring, Jacob Tissa with you here. Charlie, last thing on the Bengals before we send it over to Elliot to dive into the Red side of this. Obviously, a lot of big decisions have to be made. Like, what's that first big domino that's going to fall? Is it going to be in your opinion, like, where do you feel like this is trending? Is it going to be the Jamar Chase extension done first, an announcement on T's future first? Like, what do you think the first big domino is that's going to fall as far as timelines are concerned moving forward?
Yeah, I guess the first big domino will be them giving the franchise tag to T. Higgins because, there's a deadline there. But actually, we talked about Duke Tobin takeaways earlier. My biggest takeaways was the theme of urgency and needing to get deals done sooner to open up more flexibility to address a team full of flaws. The team that Tobin acknowledged has a lot of holes that they need to address and improve to make sure they're improving the team and not just keeping the guys they have. So the timeline and the urgency with T is where my focus is. Again, we won't know where that really stands until it's done. I believe that there's no deal that's close. It's either done or it's not done. And the Bengals, of course, have to cross the finish line. T has to cross the finish line as well. They've got to get this done, and that should be the first domino that falls. Who knows if it will?
All right, over to the Cincinnati Reds. We'll send it to Elliot in a second, but I do have to ask, look, at this point, you were just in spring training last week. At this point last year, there was a lot of expectations for the Reds. A lot of people were feeling excited about this team coming off that run with all the rookies being called up and Ellie McLean and Steer and everyone having that big breakout rookie year. So there was a lot of expectations and excitement for the Reds last year at this time. But when you covered spring training last year for David Vell leading the way for a team with high expectations and this team with obviously Terry Francona with high expectations, how much different did your visit to camp feel this year versus last year? Two teams, both with expectations, if you will.
Well, the vibe's completely different in my opinion, and Terry Francona is a factor on a lot of that for sure. I think there would regardless be a massive difference just in how the players are carrying themselves, regardless of who the manager was, because of how much last season, in the words of one of the guys, punched them in the mouth. Last year, the vibe at spring training was unbridled optimism. Man, we won all these. We were one game behind the Diamondbacks, they were saying, and they made it to the World Series, and we have more young talent than the Diamondbacks, and we're next. And that was the tone, and that was the vibe, and that was the message. And of course, no, that did not happen. And I'm reminded of like a Hunter Green quote, like, we're tired of talking. Like, we can say whatever we want, but we're a bunch of guys who haven't taken that step yet, and that's what we're thinking about. Spencer Steer, very similar message. Like, this year we just have to do it. The time for talking about expectation and vibe, it's like we're kind of past that as a group. And it's a bunch of players that have to get better. It's a manager who's playing a role in that as well. They've got to go do it. Who knows what this Red team's going to be? They're going to need to have a lot of guys click. They certainly have talent, but a lot needs to change. And again, no one has those answers. And let's play out the season and see how it goes.
Elly De La Cruz is having an unbelievable start to the spring. I think we have this debate, I think, once every spring. And it's right around the beginning. You start to feel the good vibes. Baseball's in the air. The birds are chirping. Feels warmer outside. How much stock are you putting in to a great performance by, let's say, Elly De La Cruz, or let's say a subpar performance by, like, Nick Lodolo yesterday, right? How much weight are you putting into spring training performances?
Yeah, a wise person once told me that in spring training, there are two things that matter, and it's your job to figure out which two things they are. Because there are a million things that are happening. So, like last year, for example, Alexis Diaz's struggles in spring were real, and those translated into the season, and he started slow. Will Benson had a monster spring last season, and that did not translate into the season. With Elly specifically, I'll kind of get off my main Elly take here. Last season, kind of the big feature I did on him was how it was an off season full of change, a new workout partner in Juan Soto, some pretty significant changes to his approach and his identity and the style of hitter he wanted to be. Completely different changes with, where he was as, his first full year in the big leagues. There were a million different things. What this offseason was about for Elly was about very small tweaks and was about intangibles. It was about kind of a very tiny change with this swing that gets the bat path more consistent. It's about cutting his strikeout rate down by a bit. The big number that Elly was chasing last year was 80 steals. The big number that Elly's chasing this year, he told me, be safe 90% of the time. And that is a sign of the maturity, the growth, the, you don't want to call it a winning mentality because that's kind of a cliche, but there's something to that with what's really is important to him with the lessons that he learned last year are, as Hunter Green told me, understanding his role in the organization and bringing everyone along with him. That'll be the most important thing that Elly does this season. He'll accomplish that with the way he plays, with the consistency he plays with. Elly uses the word consistency and discipline a lot. He used that when talking to me about his season, and now he's got to go do it as well.
You mentioned Will Benson. Will Benson last year, obviously a very disappointing season, but it's just one bad year. I think he showed enough promise in 2023 where I could, at least in the future, trust Will Benson. Do you think the Reds have that mindset right now? Do you think you could see Will Benson in the outfield, which at least right now seems to be set, but after Austin Hayes in the depth chart in the outfield, could Will Benson be that number 5?
Will Benson has more upside than anyone in the Reds outfield, and I wouldn't have him on my 26-man projected roster right now.
Yeah.
That shows the disparity that there is with a million guys in the Reds organization. Is Austin Hayes, was last year a fluky season, or was last year, obviously he won't have the kidney infection, but will he keep going down that trend? Jake Fraley, who is he right now? Does Spencer Steer take a big step forward or just have some better luck in 2025? Does TJ Friedel stay healthy? Like, everyone has a thing. With Benson, that gulf is the widest, again, competing for a roster spot. He was very confident when I talked to him. He said that last year was a stepping stone to his greatness, that last year reinforced some things specifically with his swing, but overall he didn't take it as a huge step back. But obviously the proof will be in, Terry Francona saying that, well, Benson, this is a very, very important spring for him. And again, I don't have Will on my projected 26-man roster right now, but he is certainly in position to go out and earn a spot. He has the talent to be this team's best outfielder, but he's just one of a million guys like Strand. I don't know what player Strand's going to be this season. Yeah. I don't know that anybody does. McLean, I'm as high on McLean as I could possibly be, but how much rust is there going to be? Nobody knows. That's what this season is, and Will Benson certainly is one of those guys.
Another bubble guy, at least a guy that I'm still trying to figure out, Noelvi Marte. I think something happened last year. He regressed. He got to winter ball. He didn't play well. He's in spring training, and we're so very early into spring training, but we haven't seen a ton of great things from Noelvi Marte as of this moment. Is he a guy, at least on your 26, to start to start opening day?
He is not on my 26. And kind of, the irony for the Reds is that, well, last year the plan at this point was Noelvi Marte was going to be the Reds' everyday third baseman, one of the most consistent players down the stretch in 23. And we all know how bad Noelvi Marte was last season.
Yeah.
What's so fascinating was, of everyone in the Reds organization, Noelvi Marte is still the only person in the upper levels of the minor leagues or the major league roster, the only person with all of the tools to be a real, consistent, everyday third baseman. Jeimer Candelario is going to have to prove that he's athletic enough to play that position still. CES looks a lot slimmer. He hasn't played that position regularly. Gavin Lux has to prove he has the arm. Espinal has to prove he is the bat. Of course, Marte has more to prove than any of them. But if you're just looking at upside and ceiling, he's still the only guy with the tools and the upside and to be able to do it all at third base. And now, will he ever get there? I have absolutely no idea. Again, I'm not expecting to see that from him anytime in the near future in the big leagues. But that kind of keeps him still in the conversation, still in the picture, looking at the long-term plan for the Reds because of how many questions they do have at third base. And again, not too high on him entering this season, but he's another guy like Will Benson. Man, if he hits, that changes everything, and so they won't give him a lot of opportunity. He'll have to earn that opportunity, but they kind of would like to see that happen because that would go a long way.
Do you think the defensive positioning at the corners, first and third, do you think they have, or Terry Francona has an idea of how that's going to play out to start this season? As of right now, I think it could be any combination of, it's Gavin Lux, Jamir Candelario, CES. Who in your mind, at least right now, has the position of first and third?
I don't think they're going to be everyday guys to start the season. I think you'll want to see them get multiple looks. I think you'll see pitcher-specific stuff if it's a ground ball pitcher on the mound. Maybe you have a slicker fielder and Gavin Lux at third base or something, or even Espinal, of course, at third base, something like that. I think that's what you'll see because, like I said, each of these guys has a whole lot that they need to show that they can be an everyday third baseman. But I'll say this as well, they're paying Jamer $15 million a year because they saw something in him. And also, too, if Jamer stayed healthy, he would have been on pace to hit 29 homers last season. And for a Reds team that didn't have enough power, that's still a lot of homers. Gavin Lux was the 13th best hitter in baseball in the second half of last year. So, one, he'll be in there. Two, they'd sure like to get that bat at third base, where it's kind of an open spot right now. Espinal, with what he can do defensively, gives him value in that spot there. CES, man, if he can play third, he might be able to hit 40 homers at third base. So all these guys also have something attached to them where it's not like where they were in 2023 where, no offense, but Nick Senzel was entering the season starting as their third baseman, and they knew they were kind of holding on until Elly debuted. So it's a different spot now because they do have more, but none of these guys is a sure thing or anywhere close.
All right, good stuff. Charlie Goldsmith, always a fan favorite, always one of our favorites, whether it's here and off the bench. I know you hung out with Nick Kirby the other day on Chatterbox Reds. We always appreciate you giving us some time. Everyone loves your work. Where can people find your work right now? I know you're obviously covering a couple things right now for Cincinnati Magazine and, of course, Charlie's Chalkboard. Just tell people where they can find your work as we wrap things up here.
Yeah, today on Cincinnati Magazine's website, I've got a big in-depth feature on Elly De La Cruz with a lot of one-on-one interviews. So I really hope you check that out. And then kind of for the day-to-day analysis, a lot of combine stuff, that's on charlieschalkboard.substack.com.
All right, good stuff. Charlie, you the man. Appreciate you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, this is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Again, we touched on a lot there. I know we're wrapping things up on the radio side, but we'll dive into more of this as we close out the YouTube side when we come back. Until tomorrow on radio, this has been Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. All right, we're back off the bench. I know we only have about 10 minutes left to close it out here on the YouTube side. Appreciate Charlie Goldsmith. We talked Bengals. We talked Reds. Let's go to the Bengals side first. Any key takeaways right there? We asked him about the first big domino to fall, obviously because of the timeline or because of the deadline. T. Higgins, probably that's going to be the first big domino as far as the franchise tag. But we still don't – that to me, I don't count that as a domino because I think we all know he's going to get tagged, but that doesn't mean he's a Bengal, and that doesn't mean that he won't get traded, right? What do you guys think that first domino is going to be for the Bengals as far as that first big announcement of here's Jamar's contract, Trey Hendrickson, here's his contract, or we're trading Trey Hendrickson? What do you guys think that first big domino is going to be?
I'm still under the belief that if T. Higgins gets extended, it will be announced at the same exact time as Jamar.
Yeah.
That's the belief I'm operating under. I think that's a uniform announcement because they work with the same agent, because it's so much guaranteed money for both of them, because the cap and everything you have to do there. I think it makes the most sense for the Bengals to work with those numbers in unison and make it all work for them under the umbrella they're working on right now. So I expect those two dominoes, if you will, to fall at the exact same time. I would expect that to happen before Trey Hendrickson. because I don't think you can extend Trey Hendrickson without knowing you have Jamar Chase locked up, and I don't think Jamar Chase is locked up without T. Higgins locked up. So that's where I get to that consensus here. I do think if we're going to get off of extensions, I think cuts will happen sooner. I think we saw Sheldon Rankins happen already. Charlie said that they'll wait to have the replacement before they move on from the current player. That's certainly the sentiment we saw from Scott Peters, the new O-line coach for the Bengals, yesterday, talking about Alex Kappa, and the rest of the guards basically just said they're guards and then raved about Amarius Mims and Orlando Brown. So not a lot of great words to be said about those guys. I think cuts will happen before extensions, but I think all those extensions are going to happen pretty close together.
Yeah, I think if there was anything that came first between the big guys, I think it's the tag, and then after that it's most likely going to be a Jamar Chase deal. I think that deal has to be first, and if you're going to pair them together, that's great. I just think based on what he tweeted, and I know you can't read too much into the cap, I have a hard time believing that he tweets that out as a joke. I don't think that's the case. I think they're far off from where they want to be. I think Jamar has to get a deal done. Legitimately has to. There's no option there. So Jamar will be announced first, and potentially maybe Trey Hendrickson announced second, and that would leave T. Higgins again third.
Yeah, Duke Tobin explicitly said that their top priority this offseason is making Jamar Chase the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. So that is their number one priority, and the way that Duke was speaking, I'm not entirely convinced that deal's not done.
Yeah.
Or at least the framework of that deal's not done. Why else would you go up there and stamp highest paid non-quarterback, unless that is already done and already discussed, or at least rolling in that direction pretty convincingly? We all know he will be, but as the GM in those negotiations, you wouldn't stamp that confirmed unless you know that that's almost done. So that's where I keep going back to. I think T and Jamar get announced at the same time. Maybe the negotiations go hand in hand, because if Jamar's done, what other reason would they have for not announcing it? And I just can't get those comments through my head without thinking it's at least close to done.
Is Jamar going to be 40? Again, when Duke Tobin said he's going to be the highest paid non-quarterback in the league, I mean, it has to be about 40, right? Who is the current highest paid non-quarterback right now?
CD, isn't it? Is it not
No,
CD? Oh, it's Justin Jefferson.
Nick Bosa, I thought.
Is it not Justin
Sorry
Jefferson?
to put you guys on the spot. I just
He's
didn't
the
know who
highest
that
paid.
was.
I'll look it up to make sure.
Yeah,
But
like that's what I'm
Justin
curious.
Jefferson's the highest paid wide receiver. I don't think he's the highest paid
Okay.
Non-quarterback. Because that's what I'm curious, like what that number is. Because the highest, to make him the highest paid wide receiver, we know what that number is. But when they came out and said make him the highest paid,
it's going to be 40. It's absolutely going to be 40. There's no way around that. The highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL comes pretty far down the line. You're right, Elliot. It is Justin Jefferson. Edges out Nick Bosa by $0.5 million. So obviously that was a point for Jefferson as well. That number comes in at $37.5 million for this year, an average of 35. So I would assume that Jamar Chase will comfortably be in the 40s. And I see a lot of people freaking out saying you signed him last offseason, you save $5 million or whatever. I'm not so convinced that Jamar Chase is signing a $36, $37 million extension last offseason. I think that number is closer to 38 or 39 probably, maybe even still sniffing that $40 million annual value. And I'm just not under the impression that the Bengals lost all this money by having him win the Triple Crown. I think it's, $2 or maybe $3 million annually. You did obviously handicap yourself a little bit when it comes to the signing bonus, but in terms of annual value, I think this is basically the contract Jamar Chase was always going to get. I cannot wrap my head around anyone saying they don't know why we'd give him $40 million. $40 million is too big of a number to extend Jamar Chase. Have you watched the Bengals? Have you watched Jamar Chase? He's worth 55. So I'd give him whatever he needs to stay. It needs to be a long-term deal. He needs to be a Bengal. He absolutely deserves $40 million. He deserves more. So whatever he needs to stay, that's what the number should be.
I wonder if that was part of it. I mean, Duke Tobin said he changed his mind last offseason.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if he's like, you know what? Whatever you're offering me right now, I think I can get definitely more after this season. Right. So I'll just wait one more, and because I don't have to sign right now. Maybe that was a part of it. I don't know, obviously, anything about what goes behind the scenes of the Cincinnati Bengals, but it does feel like he bet on himself, and he won big time last year.
Because I'm glad you brought that up, because that's kind of where I was going too. It's like, to go back, the Bengals took a lot of heat for why did they approach him about getting an extension done and then not get it done. But then you
Yeah.
have Duke Tobin that comes out and says, well, he changed his mind. I almost wonder if the Bengals were ready to give him a deal that would have made him, they would have given him more money than Justin Jefferson. And I think he wanted a penny more than Justin Jefferson. That was the running joke. I don't think it was actually a penny. He was going for more than that. But I think the Bengals are ready to make him the highest paid wide receiver in football last offseason. I think he changed his mind, to Jacob's point, to do the whole, betting on himself.
Yeah.
What I didn't like was then, okay, if you changed your mind and you sat out knowing that the Bengals weren't going to go up above that number last offseason, then it led to that distraction it didn't need to be. But I don't think we need to live in last year's offseason. I just thought it tied into that. We'll see how long before they get it done.
One more thing on last year's offseason. I think we talked about it a lot leading up to the holdout and the extension with Jamar Chase. There was one other elite wide receiver on the free agency market. I guess not free agency market, on the extension market. That was CeeDee Lamb. And for a while, myself, Elliot, we all said that Jamar Chase is waiting for CeeDee Lamb to sign because CeeDee Lamb could outdo Justin Jefferson, therefore resetting the market, having Jamar Chase even go above that. When CeeDee Lamb signs the contract below Justin Jefferson, are we sure that's not what changed Jamar's mind? The market's not going to move for me. I'm going to move it myself.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we overlooked right afterwards when that happened. If he was expecting CeeDee Lamb to go in the $37 million range, which would slot him right comfortably at 40, it's a lot different conversation when CD signs a $34 million deal, keeping Justin Jefferson as number one. I think that could have played into last year's negotiations as well.
Fair enough. All right, well, we'll touch on the Red stuff at Charlie Goldsmith tomorrow because it's noon. We out. We got a lot to do here on this Thursday, not a Friday. We got to plan our Friday still, so we got a lot to do there. But any closing thoughts as we wrap it up? Do you guys have any shows today coming up?
Nothing coming up. Dialed in. Canceled today. Box lunch back tomorrow. So we'll see you then.
We'll see you then. Also, Shrek 5 announced.
Oh, wow.
Do you hate Shrek?
I'm 35. I don't know. I never got into Shrek.
It's an adult movie.
I mean, it's an adult movie.
It's an adult movie?
It's made
It's
for
a cartoon.
adults. The first Shrek came out like 20 years ago.
So I would have been, 15?
Right in the sweet spot.
That's right when that's who it's marketed
Were a lot of 15-year-olds watching Shrek 1 at the time?
Yes.
Probably.
Yes. There were.
We'll do some research.
There weren't. I don't think there were cell phones or anything. There were like the Nokias back then. Like people needed something to do. Let's go watch Shrek. Come
I don't know if I'm stopping what I'm doing with my friends and say, let's go to the movie theater and watch a cartoon. I don't know. I don't know. I'll watch Shrek 2. Add it to the list. Shrek 1 through 4, apparently. Add it to the list.
That's right.
Have a good day, everybody.
Bye-bye.